Hello, and either welcome or welcome back to the NOTCAST. It is the Monday, 6th of November, 2023. But today I'm talking about a 35-year-old record. I'm trying to pretend it's not actually 35 years old, because then I start to feel very, very old indeed. It's Morrissey's debut solo LP, which comes in various configurations, names, and covers, which was released in March 1988. Here I'm just going to give you a very quick overview. Most of the world is called Viva Hate. For a short period of time in Australia, it was called Education in Reverse. And then in 1997, EMI decided to change the cover for their 100th anniversary and released this version with a bizarre photo that isn't actually a very good LP cover. But there you are. This is the first of Morrissey's albums, and he has released something like 15 solo records over the past 35 years of varying quality, and I'm not going to be bitchy about them. I'm just going to be honest, because that's how these things work. I think people can smell out inauthenticity and insincerity as soon as it arrives, and what's the point of being anything but who you are, including being Morrissey? So pick up the story. What happened before that? As I mentioned in my previous episode about the Smiths' Strange Ways, Here We Come, I have used a number of source texts, including but not limited to this fabulous book, Peepholism, The Art of Morrissey, including all the Smiths covers, and this truculent, devious and unreliable autobiography, freshly imprinted into Penguin Classics right from the off by the Stephen of Morrissey himself. And it's fair to say, and I've said this before about autobiography, this is a fascinating and slightly scary look into the man's mind. And what's telling is not just what's in there, but what isn't in there. And there's quite a lot that's known and has been verified, and in some cases seen with your very own eyes, that's not mentioned in autobiography. So I've dug into this and a couple of other things as well, just to do my research, because as we all know, do your own research is often slang for what I watched a guy on YouTube talking about it, and I'm a guy on YouTube, and I don't like doing unsubstantiated opinion, despite what some of you might think. I can back it up. You don't have to agree with me, but I know the reasons. Apart from cucumbers, I do not like cucumbers, and it is an irrational, instinctual hatred. They look like slugs. I don't understand why people eat them, but so be it. But pickles, actually, 'cause pickles are sliced cucumbers. I don't understand them, just don't get them at all. But so be it. Meat is murder, or as somebody once heckled Morrissey, meat is dinner. I did that a very, very long time ago. I was younger, obviously stupider, obviously, and I was drunk. Three things which I'm not very much of these days, neither young nor stupid nor drunk, so that's good, isn't it? So the Smiths split in August-ish to September-ish 1987, and it was a slow, steady kind of realisation. Now, if any of you have been in a relationship, fantastic, that's great for you. But if any of you are in a relationship that's come to an end, you will know that there is a time when you start to work out if there's a difference between the climate and the weather. And it's really, really important to understand the difference between the two. The weather is what's happening on a day-to-day basis. Climate is what's happening on a year-by-year, month-by-month basis. And if you're suddenly finding out that you have nothing but bad days, that isn't weather, that's climate. Okay, that's the way it is. And the climate in the Smiths had changed. Johnny Marr had obviously said, I need to take a break, and wanted to do wider and different things that didn't involve the relatively limited artistic palette that the Smiths contained. Now, that's not a criticism of the Smiths. They are fucking amazing band. Sorry for swearing, kids. I'm recording this after 9 p.m, so it is past the watershed. But there are things that the Smiths just couldn't do. Things that Johnny Marr really, really was interested in, funk, electronic music, things like chic. And you can hear that in Johnny's contributions to the Talking Heads, to electronic, to is that some of those sounds were things that you would have thought, yes, that's Johnny Marr, but that's not the Smiths. The Smiths is a vessel, and it's got a certain size and a certain shape. But then you think about that and you kind of go, well, there are things which don't fit into that size and into that shape and into that vessel, and those were still parts of his artistic identity that Johnny Marr wanted to explore. And alongside a number of other factors, the Smiths slowly fell apart over a few weeks. There was a provisional attempt to continue the lineup with a new guitarist. I think there was 2 days booked in a studio with a guitarist called Ivor Perry, who I think was in Easterhouse, I think. And he played for a day with the band on a primitive version of a track called Bengali in Platforms. And what that kind of showed, because I think there was only 1 day of it, it showed more than anything else that actually what the Smiths needed was something else. And without Johnny, it wasn't the Smiths anymore, as was later proven. Not long after that, Andy Rourke left the band, so it was really just Mike and Morrissey, the two people that would end up being the most bitter of enemies in future, thanks to that court case, which gets more pages in autobiography than I think the existence of the Smiths does, which is a strange and unusual way of looking at it, but so be it. And on the 18th of August 1987, Stephen Street posted a tape to Morrissey. I can't remember exactly what it said in the letter. Something along the lines of, "Not sure if you're interested. Here are some songs. You might like them." Obviously more eloquent than that. Apparently Nick Kent, the journalist, also wrote to Morrissey offering his services. And I think the text of that is in autobiography somewhere. Yes, exactly. I've opened it, page 222, where he says a few things, and Morrissey doesn't take him up on the offer, which I think all things considered is probably a good idea. It would be kind of like me writing to Suede in 1994, and I cannot play guitar despite the existence of a guitar behind me. I can't play. I'm working on it. I'm slow, I'm sure, methodical, not particularly good. And going, "I'll do it." It's like, just because you want to do it doesn't mean you can. As we've seen, a triumph of ambition over ability. And we've all seen bands like that, haven't we, kids? Let's not name any names. Stephen Street wrote to Morrissey with the idea that they could possibly be B-sides for the remaining singles on the Smiths' career to close off Strange Ways, Here We Come. So that would be the singles for I Started Something I Couldn't Finish, Stop Me If You Think You've Heard This One Before, Girlfriend in a Coma, which various combinations of live tracks and radio sessions were used to kind of plump those out. And then all of a sudden, as is often the case with things when they start to fall apart, is that it goes very, very slowly, and then all of a sudden it goes very, very quickly indeed. If you've ever been at the end of a relationship, and as I was saying before about the difference between the climate and the weather, there comes a point where suddenly a confluence of events happens and everything collapses very, very quickly. Thinking about people that I've known that have died of old age, I've looked at them sometimes and gone, you might have a year, you might have 2 years. And then all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, they're dead. And you kind of like, for example, you then go, and I remember saying to somebody about my grandma, actually, that, it's going to be weeks, and it was days. It goes very, very quickly. So the ending of the Smiths was unexpected, I think, to some people. It was sudden, it was rushed. And EMI exercised their options, and their options were to pick up Morrissey as a solo artist and effectively convert the deal that the Smiths had signed with EMI into a deal for Morrissey as a solo artist. Now, if you are Morrissey, firstly, why are you wasting your time watching this? There are other things to watch in the world, but there is an element of him effectively saying in here that somehow the EMI deal was bestowed upon him against his will. Now, very few people would say, I don't want a recording contract with EMI. Very few people would say, I don't want to do this for a living. I'd rather work in an office. Looking for a job, found a job. Heaven knows I'm miserable now. But the way Morrissey describes it in the book is that it's more of an event than an achievement, which is, in one way, an understatement. The fact that Viva Hate exists is enough. It's just a first step in the journey. I don't think it was meant to be, this fabulous, unimpeachable work of art. It was a record made out of a number of things. One of which was, the desire to keep working. Another one of which was the desire to see what it would be like to be a solo artist. Another one would be to effectively kind of go, would this happen? Could this work? What would this be? How would this work? And when you presumably, as in the end of any relationship, there's a moment. And I think the Morrissey and Marv's A Musical Marriage, when you come to the end of a marriage, there's a moment where you suddenly realise that all the dominoes have fallen. There is no coming back from this. That is the end of that relationship. And there's a point where you go, there's a moment, and I remember a very specific moments when significant relationships in my life have come to a close. I remember the minutes immediately afterwards, and I'm kind of going, something that was a huge part of my life for a number of years has suddenly, irrevocably ended, and I am now in the next part of my life. Whatever that part of that is the next part that I am in. And this was probably where Morrissey was when he was coming to making Viva Hate, is he had these songs from Stephen Street that were exciting and interesting and not really known. He had to go, right, I'm going to write with somebody else now. I'm going to try something else. And to see, well, what happens next. So recording, I think, happened at the Wool Hall in Bath, according to the, I think the sleeve that's on here. Let me just quickly check. No, it isn't actually. I think that's where it was recorded, and it was recorded quite quickly with a band that was assembled in short notice. So the musicians that Morrissey has for this record are, and I have to quickly check and see where they're on the sleeve, Vinnie Riley from the Durity column, and also, of course, from Factory Records. We have Stephen Street on bass guitar and guitars. Vinnie was on guitars and keyboards, and Andrew Parisi was on drums. It was recorded in Bath during winter 1987 and produced by Stephen Street. So it's kind of weird having a guy that's written the music also playing the guitar and the bass, who's not actually part of the title, but effectively being the architect. And what I found is great musicians, or more correctly, often really interesting and good vocalists, need a foil. They need somebody that can be effectively the counterweight to them, so that they don't go too far in any one direction. Really important for any artist is to have a support network around them of people that kind of sniff out the bullshit and say, this isn't a good idea, this is going to look bad. There are some people, especially solo artists, that get so used to the idea of everything that they do being absolutely fabulous and amazing that they don't have anybody who's able to push back against them and go, why? Tell me why this is a good idea, and then pushing back and asking questions, which means that if you operate in an echo chamber where everyone says yes sir and thinks that you're amazing, the risk is you end up in an environment where you think all of your decisions are genius, and if anything goes wrong, it's jealous sabotage by saboteurs who want to undermine you and see you fail for their own purposes. The concept or the possibility that perhaps you might be making bad decisions just doesn't exist in that mind. So, and what we've seen through the number of people that Morrissey has worked with over his period of time is that he's unsentimental about some of the people that he's worked with. None of that is reflected on here in the grooves of, well, I was going to say Education in Reverse, but that is the Australian title. It is called Education in Reverse for a short period in Australia, because the original working title for Viva Hate was Education in Reverse. And for some reason, when they had the proofs and the slicks that were sent over to them by the label, is that the Australians thought, it's called Education in Reverse, presumably looking at an old bit of paperwork, and decided that was going to be the title. So, according to Peepholism, and we quickly go to the page here, which talks about the album, and it is saying, very quickly, the Australian version of the LP was mistakenly manufactured with this title. No mean feat, considering all EMI licensees abroad would have been provided with finished sleeve film containing the correct title from which to print their own sleeves. So this version was imported, as you can probably tell by the importation sticker. It was probably quite expensive at the time that it came out. As I said before, I bought a job lot of an entire Smiths and Morrissey collection about 20 years ago for £150 off somebody I worked with, and then I sold all the duplicates, got myself about £200 back, and effectively did very, very well out of it. Also pointing out very quickly, whilst we have the page here, is the back photo for the album, by the way, takes it's I'm showing you this, so hopefully you can see it. Is a photograph of clouds in Manchester next to George Formby's grave, which of course you won't know because the grave has been cut out of the photograph. But it's always interesting and curious to see these things. So the first thing that anybody heard from the album, and undoubtedly I think one of his biggest selling singles, it sold 75,000 copies in week one, was this amazing single Suedehead, which takes its name from a book by Richard Allen, which was a sequel to a book about football hooliganism called Skinheads. Suedeheads were again, people that operated in the football subculture of football hooliganism, etc. And I think at this point, Morrissey was, and this is not, I don't think this is controversial to say, wanted to have that sense of belonging, of a gang, of being somewhere where he felt that he was part of a wider thing. As we know from all of his previous releases and records and lyrics, is that certainly Morrissey was probably a perpetual adolescent. By the way, that's not a criticism. I feel like I'm just a really much older version of the 15-year-old version of me. So I feel like I'm a perpetual adolescent as well. Apart from when I get up off the sofa or when I turn around too fast and suddenly I realise my neck hurts because I've looked to the left too quickly. When you are that age, 15, 16, very, very formative, you don't necessarily know answers to a lot of the questions that you've got, which is, well, who am I? What am I going to be? Who am I going to belong to? What's going to be my gang? What's going to be my tribe? Am I going to love anybody or somebody? And who's that somebody going to be? These are all the kind of questions which Morrissey having, and I completely understand this, it's much like if you're in a job or in a relationship, is that you take part of your identity and you say, part of me is, I'm a musician, or I'm a guy that works in an office, or I'm somebody's, boyfriend, girlfriend, and to my cats, I'm, a source of food. If those relationships go away, some of the key component parts of your identity start to fracture, and you suddenly start to think that you're half a person or less than that, where you suddenly go, the things that I thought I was, the roles that I had, the activities that I had, they're no longer part of my life. And so I think Suedehead as a title was kind of allying itself a little bit to that sense of belonging, that sense of being able to run with the pack, being able to be part of a gang. And it is just an absolutely fabulous song, by the way. Here is the His Master's Voice 45 7-inch in a lovely, lovely sleeve, by the way. I think that, the iconography at this point is great. So what you will see is that a change with the sleeve designs is, instead of it being representations of people in environments and positions of temptation or belonging that were treated in a kind of sepia fashion, all the Smith sleeves were effectively kind of representations or representations of existing photographs, with very few exceptions, that were treated as if they were almost kind of like a form of fake age newsprint, using a very kind of diluted colour palette, basically white and various shades of green, blue, purple, etc. And Morrissey did exactly the same thing, but he turned the harsh truth of the camera eye upon himself. It wouldn't be the first time that Morrissey's been on a sleeve. He was on the sleeve too, What Difference Does It Make?, after Terence Stamp withdrew permission for the usage of his image. I think it was Terence Stamp anyway. But this, if it hadn't been for that face there, you could have quite easily thought that's just another Smith sleeve. It looks like it's a Smith sleeve, sounds like it's a Smith record, produced by the guy that did the Smiths records, or at least some of the Smiths records and radio sessions. And Suedehead is a fabulous, fabulous song. No wonder it is, I think it's his biggest selling single, And I mean, obviously these days, I think Suede got to #1 in the vinyl singles chart last week, before the Beatles did their thing, with I think 600 copies of Metal Mickey's picture disc being sold. So that means that actually for 2 weeks in a row, I have bought the #1 single, because I bought Metal Mickey 2 weeks ago. I bought the Beatles Now and Then on Saturday. So I've got, for the first time in a long time, I've had the physical #1 single twice in 2 weeks in a row. Obviously in the 80s, it used to be, well, I'd have that every single bloody week, but not that way. And so Suedehead also got a release on 12-inch, by the way, before I start talking about #1s. I think this got to #5 in the charts. And some versions of it were mispressed. So instead of having I Know Very Well How I Got My Name and Hairdresser on Fire, some of them had the track that follows Suedehead on the LP, which I think is The Ordinary Boys on it. But that wasn't always the case. And so we had a fabulous song. So I mean, if you remember Take That splitting up in 1996, and if you remember them splitting up, you're old, like I am. In fact, I remember I got a phone call from one of my friends asking if I was all right the day that Take That announced the split, because he knew I was a Take That fan. And he said, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He went, "Take That split. Have you rung the hotline?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm 23. No, I haven't rung the hotline." Maybe we needed to have a Samaritan's hotline for when the Smiths split, because there was this idea of, and it could be very fine, he's going, at that point, rock and music as a genre and as a cultural institution was very primitive. You know, when the Smiths split, the Beatles only split 17 years before. You know, there was still no real path around what happens when you get to 60 as an artist. You know, even the oldest acts at that point in 1987, let's say the oldest act, the Rolling Stones, they'd barely touched 25 years together, for example. There was no kind of template around, well, what do you do when you get to 70 or 80 or 90? It just didn't exist. So there was, some people thought that maybe this was the end for Morrissey, is that he'd literally just disappear and write novels that nobody would read or nobody would publish. He'd do that in about 30 years' time, by the way, when we got to List of the Lost. But there was a sense of rebirth, and certainly for me, when I became a fan of the Smiths, which was early 1988, which was just before Viva Hate came out, I had the same sense of feeling that I did when I found Frightened Rabbit, actually, which is that I found this amazing band and suddenly they're gone. You know, like the time when I liked them and they coexisted would have been weeks, and suddenly they were over, and that was it. And suddenly I went from being a fan of a band to mourning a band that I never knew, which is a strange way of living. But then I kind of thought, does this mean that I'll never get to hear any more songs by Morrissey? Oh no, there's about 200 to come. But nobody knew that yet, not even him. And so when the single came out, there was this sense of all is not lost. There was a sense of it will carry on. It'll be different, but it will carry on. And that was a really important thing, because hope is important. And so the video, by the way, for Suedehead, which is really lovely. I really like it. It's basically a tribute to James Dean. James Dean, who appeared on the cover of, I think, Big Mouth Strikes Again. Because I think it was Truman Capote on the cover of The Boy with a Thorn in His Side, where Morrissey went to Fairmont, Indiana, visited James Dean's grave, and visited a farm where he'd written something into some concrete, and did recreations of photos of James Dean that had been popular, so effectively kind of revisiting him as a homage to James Dean's existence. And of course, Morrissey's first book, which sold about 4 copies, it was called, I think, James Dean is Dead. What is it? James Dean is Not Dead. Somebody somewhere with a big nose, who knows, will tell me in the comments, of course. I've never read it. But that was Suedehead, and my God, what an amazing debut solo single that was. It was bright, it was sprightly, it had this wonderful guitar melody, it had this lyric that just kind of leapt off the page and told you very, very clearly that he was effectively drawing a line underneath the past and starting again. You know, this lyric about, why do you come here when you make things so bad for me? Why do you come when you make things so very hard for me? And it's just wonderful, and that soaring, effortless vocal. You know, most people could never dream of being able to think like that. Now, when you listen to songs by Morrissey or the Smiths, what you think about the placement of the vocal. Because if you listen to the instrumental versions of the songs, you might think, right, so that's an intro, that's a verse, that's a bridge. That's not how Morrissey works. The way that he places melody on top of the music is he always puts the verses in places where you kind of thought, that might be the chorus. Or he'll do things where he puts the vocal in the chorus and he puts it over what you might have thought would have been the bridge, for example. Or he might have ditched the chorus completely and gone for something completely different. So, for example, we hate it when our friends become successful. The chorus is literally Morrissey laughing. And you kind of go, oh, so that's the chorus. And you kind of go, who would do that apart from David Bowie's The Laughing Gnome, which is, again, a very strange song, but touching him with a vaudeville, tradition. So, Suedehead, what an amazing debut single that is. Most people will never do a single that good. And this, obviously, it just leapt straight into the charts at number 5. So, yes. And the B-sides. At this point, of course, Morrissey wasn't writing B-sides. He was just writing songs. And Suedehead has 2 amazing B-sides and 1 pretty good one. So I Know Very Well How I Got My Name, a 2-minute gentle acoustic melody, which is Morrissey singing about when he dyed his hair blonde, got it wrong and it turned gold. How a lovely song. And Hairdresser on Fire, which, were I sequencing the album Viva Hate, I would have put Hairdresser on Fire on it. I don't know what I would have taken off, but I would have put Hairdresser on Fire on it. And it is, and I think I'll talk about Hairdresser on Fire more when we get to the subsequent B-sides and compilation record, where it has an album placement. But it's one of those songs that you listen to, and I listened to it and I went, that's an extra track on the 12-inch. This guy must be amazing and incredible. Well, heads up, kids. He was for a long period of time. If you bought the Girotti Column album, Vinnie Riley, for the first pressing on Factory Records, you got a special, exclusive, and rather rare 7-inch single. I Know Very Well How I Got My Note Wrong. Vincent Gerard and Stephen Patrick, Factory 244. This 7-inch contains a previously unavailable, exclusive, aborted version of I Know Very Well How I Got My Note Wrong. And it's lovely. I really like it, because you get this feeling sometimes that everything that's released is perfect and has been sanity tested. And at this point, it's just, no, well, we screwed up the song. So, well, there you are. That's how it works. Of course, vinyl was still a pretty exciting format, but it had a new and quite aggressive usurper that was coming in to take control, the CD. And here is the CD single of Suedehead. And this has a 4th track, Oh Well, I'll Never Learn, taking a very, very similar approach to I Know Very Well How I Got My Name. It's, again, another 2 minutes, somewhat self-pitying acoustic ballad, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and more people should know it, because it's much, much better than its reputation deserves. Because you kind of think, well, if you're going to put an extra track on the CD, it's not going to be great, is it? Oh no, this is really good. Strong, melodic, slightly funny. I really like it. There's a very sly sense of humour at work in Morrissey's lyrics, which most people just think, oh, he's miserable and he's moping around. And it's like, no, he's laughing in the face of tragedy. And some people take that very British sense of humour and think that it is somehow miserable. And you kind of go, well, if you've got a song called Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now, are you not aware that it's a complete kind of homage to Heaven Knows I'm Missing Him Now? Some people don't, because those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. And that is why we get AC/DC albums that sound exactly the same if they're recorded in 1980 or 2020. Oh, that was bitchy. So, Viva Hate, released March 1988. No tour, only 1 live show, and an aborted Peel session. Morrissey did not take the stage and didn't tour for 5 years. So from the last Smiths live performance in concert at the Brixton Academy on the 12th of December 1986 through to the Dublin Point on, I think, 26th of April 1991 or thereabouts, Morrissey didn't play live for 4.5 years, apart from a one-off show at the Wolverhampton Civic Hall in December 1988, which I was, of course, completely oblivious to and couldn't have got to even if I wanted to go. So, Viva Hate is effectively a studio creation, the one album that Morrissey has not toured, and it is, well, apart from the Smiths, because there wasn't a band. Sorry, I coughed there for the first time all day. And I'd been kicking this cold thing for about 4 weeks. And eventually I've got to the point where I actually feel like I can finish a sentence without coughing and spluttering like an old Volkswagen Beetle. So, taken me half an hour to get to talking about the album. Sorry it took so long. It's, I think, a wonderful record. I lived inside the grooves of Viva Hate when it came out. I lived it, breathed it, was in the trenches with it, scoured the lyrics, looked for reasons, looked for meanings, looked for everything. It starts with Alsatian Cousin, which I think is the only song that could have opened the album. And if you look at all of the songs in Viva Hate, there is an underlying thematic lyrical obsession that sits alongside most of the songs. They're about history and legacy and a creative approach to the end of a relationship. So if you think about the songs that are in there that are around the end of a relationship, which could be couched in the forms of a romantic relationship, infidelity, however it is. For example, Alsatian Cousin, Angel, actually no, not Alsatian Cousin, actually Alsatian Cousin, Suedehead, Break Up the Family, Ordinary Boys, I Don't Mind If You Forget Me. Those are songs which are around and based about the idea of being left behind or at the end of a relationship. Other lyrical obsessions are around the nature of fame and does fame last? So we've got Little Man What Now, Angel, Angel, Down We Go Together, and to an extent Margaret on the Guillotine talk about it. We think also about history and legacy and one's point in history and how one got to the point where you are in that your particular life. So when Morrissey was writing this, some of the other things, Bengali and platforms, for example, Late Night Magdalen Street, Dialect Cliche, they're around what history and identity and how that forms you. So there's three kind of lyrical strands that sit inside the album that very clearly kind of indicate his headspace at that particular time. Alsatian Cousin, the opening track, absolute banger, seen it played live by Morrissey's solo band, brilliant, absolutely love it. And it has a gloriously British lyric. It opens with the line, "Were you and he lovers, and would you say so if you were? If you were, then say that you were." And there's this gorgeously British line, "On a ground sheet under canvas with your tent flap open wide. So I ask, even though I know, were you and he lovers?" And that's a kind of lyric where you kind of go, right, so that's very clearly what it's about. It's about the end of a relationship. It's about secret relationships. It's about finding somebody else and about somebody that you shouldn't be with. And you kind of go, Morrissey and Mar splitting up and Mar going to Talking Heads and to playing with the Pretenders for a bit on tour and those type of things. You kind of go, is that what he's really alluding to here? Is the idea of that it was always doomed to fail, that it was born to hang and not work? Really interesting lyric, and obviously they're underpinned with Vinnie Riley's absolutely incredible guitar playing. He was, as soon as I heard, not that I was hugely aware of his playing, but when I heard it and I thought, oh, what a fabulous guitarist Vinnie Riley is. And he doesn't get enough recognition, possibly because he insists on singing on his records and his singing voice is not to everyone's taste. Track 2 is Little Man What Now. Little Man What Now and Angel, Angel, Down We Go Together, effectively taking the point of being the penultimate, being the second song on the side one and the penultimate song on side one, kind of bookend side one as kind of little breathers. And Little Man What Now is a song about a child star appearing on a Where Are They Now type television. And there's about a fear of being over, a fear of being washed up, of always having been a has-been from a certain point in time. So, for example, Morrissey will always have been someone from the Smiths. Lou Reed will always have been someone from the Velvet Underground. Sting will always have been that guy from the Police. And Phil Collins will always be that fucking guy. I don't like Phil Collins. Sorry, Phil. I'm sure the feeling's mutual. But Little Man What Now is a song where Morrissey kind of very clearly kind of takes out his fears and his insecurities around going, is this it? Is this the end? Do I have a future? The thing that I've given my life to for the past 5 years, will I be in that, or will I have to go and live in a terraced house as some guy that used to be in a band? And as we've seen, at that point, there was a lot of uncertainty around what's the long-term career like for somebody that's in a band. as I said, the Rolling Stones were, 25 years in. They were like 46, 47 at the time that this came out, probably. And they kind of go, where's the roadmap? Where's the plan? Where's we're blazing our trail on our own. There's nobody telling us what to do because nobody's ever been here before. Track 3 is the second single released from the album. It's fabulous. It's very possibly, it's in my top 5 Morrissey solo songs, undoubtedly, and without hesitation. It is Every Day is Like Sunday. And, of course, it takes its influence from the poem by John Betjeman, Come Friendly Bombs, Rain Down on Slough. It isn't fit for humans now. The lyric is around, in a seaside town that they forgot to close down, bombs come, etc. And having lived in a seaside town, and it's the one song on the album that doesn't really fit into the 3 musical and lyrical kind of obsessions which I've mentioned previously. The ones around the end of the relationship, the nature of fame, and the nature of history. It's more a song around, well, where am I now? What is this place like? And if you go to some of the dreary British seaside towns, and I think it was inspired by Liverpool actually as well, because Liverpool went through a stage in the 80s of what was called a managed decline by the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party deliberately underinvested in Liverpool in order to deprive it of the funding it needed to be a major top-tier British town. It was almost an experiment in deprivation to see what would happen if you just sucked all the money out of an economy or a town. What happens then? And then it was a deliberate state of managed decline. They knew if they did this that the town would decline. It's exactly what happens. And then you end up going to a seaside town that they forgot to close down. The video, by the way, for Every Day is Like Sunday was filmed in Southend, which has the longest pier in the world. And also features the woman who was in it was also one of the people that was in the crowd scenes for I Started Something I Couldn't Finish, the video for that, which obviously was lots of people with quiffs riding around on bicycles. We have a 7-inch for Every Day is Like Sunday, backed with a fabulous track, Disappointed, but I'm going to put that up there. We have a CD single and a 12-inch. Now, the 3 songs on the B side of Every Day is Like Sunday are magnificent. They probably make the best 4-track EP I've heard in my life because they are Sister, I Am a Poet, Disappointed, and the splendiferous Will Never Marry. They were unfortunately all recorded the week that Viva Hate went to #1 in the charts, and so therefore couldn't be on the album because the songs hadn't been written at that point. So close, because when I listen to those 3 songs, I go, each one of them could be a single in its own right. This is one of the fabulous and most fine 12 inches and CDs that I own in my collection. I do hope it's not manufactured by those wankers at PDO in Preston. Nimbus. Good work, Nimbus. Thank you. So that is Every Day is Like Sunday. And that was the second single that came out from the album, but I dipped ahead a little bit. Forgive me, please. So we have Bengali platforms, the second controversial, it's probably about the third controversial track from Morrissey after Panic and Suffer Little Children and Reel Around the Fountain, actually. So Bengali platforms is the song that was worked on by Ivor Perry with Andy Rourke and Mike Joyce on the very last day that the Smiths existed as a cohesive entity and found out that they weren't a cohesive entity anymore. It was that day that effectively was the beginning of the very, very end, at which point it was unsalvageable. And Bengali platforms it's a difficult lyric, and I have no idea what I'm going to say about it when I go in there, so here we go. So the idea that there's a lyric in here around, well, life is hard enough when you belong here, and I'm like, that is undiplomatic. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt there. The idea of somebody that perhaps from a certain point of view, and I have to talk about racism here, from a certain point of view in certain people, the idea that if you're not a white male and you're not straight, you don't belong in Britain is the kind of mind view that I think Morrissey is articulating here. It's not a mind view that I have in the slightest. Yeah, my view is if you're British, you're British. And some British people just happen to be born in other countries, and some British people don't look like white straight male dudes, and some British people, well, Britain comes in all different colours and shapes and sizes, and that's part of what makes it brilliant and beautiful, not the idea that people that live in tents are making deliberate lifestyle choices and they enjoy freezing to death in a tent in the corner of a park because they can't afford rent, those type of things. So Bengali platforms doesn't articulate the view perhaps particularly well, and it's open to misinterpretation. You can argue that Morrissey is an agent provocateur and he's taking a point of view around that. But then you can also go, well, actually, if you were, let's say, 17 in 1973 and you saw David Bowie dressed as an alien in platform shoes with a lightning bolt painted on his face, and you kind of go, he's like me because he doesn't fit in and he feels like he's an alien in his own country. I think that's the kind of approach that Bengali platforms is trying to take. I think it's a misguided attempt. And it's not successful in its execution at exploring the concept of being an outsider in a very kind of straight-laced, inflexible society. It's an exploration of the concept of belonging versus fitting in, and there is a difference. Belonging is where you don't have to try; you just are, and you kind of belong. Fitting in means you have to kind of cut off some of your more lovely and more extreme kind of edges to fit into the box, a square peg in a round hole. And then there's the element of the inability of ambiguity. Now, all of us, even those of us that think that we're not weird but insist on eating spaghetti bolognese on a Wednesday, all of us are a little bit weird. And all of us, to an extent, temper that weirdness because of societal constructs and pressure from other people. The idea that you have to look a certain way, dress a certain way, you have to have a car and 2.4 children and a dog and all that stuff. And sometimes it's easy to sleepwalk into that. I think that's what's expected of me without asking the question, taking a step back and examining it and going, is this really who I want to be, or is this who I think society wants me to be? And you have to be confident in yourself, but it's very, very difficult if you don't have the resources to fail. So I'm going to take another slightly political angle here. If you think about the people that have independent money, they have the ability to fail without consequences. They can throw as many darts as they want at the board because they've got infinite darts in their wallet. Some people who don't have quite so much money, or they don't have any social abilities, or they don't have how I think of it, they don't have necessary social capital, you only get one throw of the dart. If you don't hit the target, that's it. Game over. You go back to the hole that you crawled out from with your ambition shot to pieces, which is why my artistic temperament was never successful, because I only had one shot at the dice. I only had one shot, and when I threw it, it didn't hit. So be it. That's the way it is. But you think about, let's say, the son of very rich people. They have the money that allows them the luxury of failure. Not everybody has that. And that is where I think Bengali platforms kind of starts to talk about the difference between belonging and fitting in. And you have to know which side of the two you are. Do you belong in an environment, or are you dulling your beauty and kind of shaving off your edges so that you fit inside the box? Different question. Angel, Angel, Down We Go Together. Track 5 is a song about, for example, effectively the end of fame, and it's going, what will happen when, and I quote the song, is when they've bought you and they've sold you, they've billed you for the pleasure, and they've made your parents cry, I will be here for you. And it's a song that can really kind of addresses, go, well, what happens on the other side of fame? Because that was something that Morrissey was looking at. The album could have fallen flat on its face, it could have sold F all copies, and he could have basically been a has-been. And then he'd have to go, Morrissey presents the Songs of the Smiths live on tour at the Southend Cliffs Pavilion between now and the end of time. It was a distinct possibility at some point. You think some bands were absolutely huge in the 80s that have aged like milk, and they do not have the kind of financial security or the careers that perhaps somebody who was once that popular, you would expect them to have. And it's inexplicable. Some bands are huge, some bands not huge. And then what I regard to be one of the best songs in Morrissey's solo canon, Late Night, Magdalen Street, which is absolutely wonderful. It's a 7.5 minute epic. Two things you don't know about it, or maybe you do if you're Stephen Street. The drum sound was sampled from Housequake by Prince. What an amazing steal. The second one is that it took its title from Magdalen Street, which was the name of a street in 1959's Carry On Teacher. It is a song about growing out of and leaving your childhood home forever. I don't remember, well, I do remember the last time I was in my childhood home, and that was 4.5 years ago. I may never go there again. And the idea of going, that's the room that I lost my virginity in. That's the room that I discovered my sex drive. That's the room that I discovered Star Wars in, for example. That's the room where I slept for 20 years, for example. And the idea of goodbye house, goodbye stairs. I know it's only bricks and mortar, but at the same point, it was part of your story. And the journey from, you can't understand who you are when you're here if you don't understand where you used to be and how you got from there to here. It's a really important part of life, is understanding, your history and the role that history has had in building who you are, and the mistakes that you've made, and the battles that you've fought and lost, and the lessons that you've learned. Right. So, and then we've got Suedehead, which, as I've said before, absolutely fantastic song. Love it to bits. Thinks the sun shines out of its arse. I do. And I will arm wrestle any of you, and you will probably beat me because I'm a wimp. But I am right. It's an amazing song. Then we have Break Up the Family. Track 8, Break Up the Family, is really obviously about the death of a relationship. And there's elements around where it looks at things like history, it looks at things like identity, it looks at things like, the things that happened on the way to me becoming who I am. The lyrics around, I want to see all my old friends tonight, and let's begin to live our lives. I'm so glad to grow older and to move away from those awful times. I want to see all my friends tonight. That's the kind of thing where you kind of go, as you become an adult, you lose friendships, you lose relationships, especially, if you're famous, for example. You suddenly go, are the people talking to me because I'm famous or because they still think I'm the dude that I once was? For example, you become more suspicious about relationships, you become more suspicious about the integrity and the honesty of the people that you're around, and you kind of go, you're hanging out with me because I can get you on the guest list, or are you hanging out with me because you like my company, or you're hanging out with me because I'll buy the rounds because I'm famous? Those type of things, really big questions. It's about a move beyond the childhood gang, about moving beyond the scope of belonging and still going, well, what role am I going to have as an adult now? Because if you think about the Smiths being Morrissey's move from adolescence to adulthood, when the band ended, obviously the adolescence came to an end. He had to then move out of home, break up the family, and become, a guy living on his own, effectively as a solo artist. And that was obviously an enormous shock and very painful. There's a thing called complicated grief, which is a long and extended grieving period that happens at the end of relationships. And the relationships don't have to be romantic. They can be work-wise. They can be musical. And I suspect this is what Morrissey had, is, the defining grief that he had for a long period of time was about the relationship that he thought he was going to have, is that there was going to be Morrissey and Ma going to grow old together, make amazing music for the rest of time, and be like an amazing Lennon and McCartney style songwriting duo, or Richards and Jagger. And that's not what happened. It came to an end and it died. And I think at some point, Morrissey described the Smiths as a beautiful corpse. It was all that type of stuff. Track 9, by the way, is The Ordinary Boys. And this is a song that I think has been deleted off the reissue in 2012 or thereabouts, which obviously is Morrissey's prerogative to do. It's a lyric about the ordinary boys, happy going nowhere, living in their supermarket towns, knowing nothing about being no one but themselves, ordinary girls in supermarket clothes who think it's very clever to be cruel to you. I've been at that school. I suspect it's not the same one as Morrissey, but if you were the kind of kid that listened to the Smiths in 1987, you almost definitely knew and avoided those kids in the common room. And then we have that lyric where it goes, all their lives laid out before them, they are so lucky, and they don't even know that they are, because there's a security around that. You go and become the person that society wants you to be. You become, a husband or a wife. You have 2.4 children. You have the Mondeo in the drive. You have cats, dogs, a mortgage. You take up golf, all these type of things. Not everybody follows that path. Everyone has to follow a different path to get to the same point. And that's where I think the Ordinary Boys is around that security of just going, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be that guy, and I'm going to do this thing, and just have that absolute confidence that that is what life is going to be, and it's going to be pretty good. Not everybody has that. I certainly didn't have that when I was younger. I kind of not made my own luck, but I made some decisions, and enough of them turned out okay for me to get to the point where I am today. Not every decision I made was good. Not every decision I made ended well. Some of them ended tragically and awfully and heartbreakingly. But I got to where I am today, and that's where I need to be and who I am. And by the sounds of it, Morrissey was feeling very distinctly a sense of insecurity around, what is my future going to be? Who knows? Track 10 is I Don't Mind If You Forget Me. I think this might be the only song of Viva Hate that hasn't been played live, which is mind-blowing because it's fucking brilliant. What an incredible song it is. It should be the last song during the main set of at least one Morrissey gig. I Don't Mind If You Forget Me. Again, it's a song that's kind of addressed to Smiths fans, or you can also say possibly Johnny Marr and former Smiths. The idea of going, I don't mind if you forget me, having learnt my lesson, I never left an impression on anyone. Now this line, so you send me your hardened regards where once you'd send me love, that is the sound of somebody that has been, now I have to talk to Johnny through lawyers, and I don't like it at all. Very, very obvious what that is. But the idea of going, is going, I don't know what's going to happen. If you forget me, then so be it. I carry on. I be myself. I don't necessarily, it's not like a begging for acceptance or for belonging. It's more a song that just accepts, this might be it. This might be my last shot, and then that's over. And then we have two more songs. Dial a Cliche. Dial a Cliche was originally in a higher key, by the way, and there are some circulating recordings of Morrissey trying the song in a higher key and it not really working. And it's, I think, Dial a Cliche is really about conformity to what I call standardism. So the idea of going, there's the thing where you go, grow up, be a man, and close your mealy mouth. The idea of going, you're not conforming to the idea of what masculinity is. You're not conforming to the idea of what a man should be. And going, well, actually, who says what a man should be? Tell me if you can what makes a man, as Jack Brel, I think, sang. And if, those type of things, going, well, actually, I'm not going to do the things that you want me to do because you want me to do them. If I do them, it's because I think they're the right thing to do, which is very important, to follow your own path sometimes. And then the last track, which was at one point mooted to be the title of a Smiths LP, Margaret on the Guillotine, with this lovely lyric, which I fully endorsed at the time. The kind people have a wonderful dream. Margaret on a guillotine. Margaret Thatcher, for those of you who don't know, was a Conservative Prime Minister in the UK between 1979 and 1990. She said there is no such thing as society, before also proving that if there was no such thing as society, it was because the society that existed before she was elected, she had tried to smash with a hammer and demolish, turning us all into individual, happy little consumer robots, or economic units of production. Rise up and overthrow, comrades. Now, whilst I'm being very flippant about that, when I was talking earlier about the managed decline that we had in the city of Liverpool, which tied in with the lyric from Every Day is Like Sunday, Margaret Thatcher was hated by many, many people in Britain between 1979 and 1990, and for many, many years after as well, as somebody that didn't regard things like kindness or equality or fairness to be in any way virtuous, but they were merely, encumbrances attached to the others by lily liberals with bleeding hearts, and everyone should just fight it out to the death in the gladiatorial sport that was called capitalism. It was, growing up under Thatcher was fucking horrible. We were poor, we were hungry, couldn't really afford new clothes, could barely afford the mortgage, constantly grossly underpaid my parents for their skills, and we were always struggling to get to the end of the month. And if there was one thing that I remembered very, very clearly about my childhood, is we were broke and we were making out to other people that we weren't, and life was tough and hard, and I hated it. And what I saw from the government is, there's two types of government. There's the government that exists to protect the powerful from the powerless, and the government that exists to protect the powerless from the powerful. The Conservatives were in the former part in 1980s, which was to protect the powerful from the powerless. They decided they were going to close the mines. They were quite happy to have people starve, to have riots in the streets, to have deprivation on a mass scale. And as far as I was concerned, that was an unnecessary form of cruelty that didn't need to happen. And I obviously don't vote for that particular party, I'll put it that way, to this day. That is Viva Hate. That is Education in Reverse. That is Morrissey's first solo LP. And I love it to bits. It's a very meaningful LP to me then, very meaningful LP to me now. I'm going to quickly wrap up with some extra releases that came out at around about the same time. Stephen Street and Morrissey wrote a song called Please Help the Cause Against Loneliness that was recorded by Sandy Shaw. Here's a 7-inch when the players on this were, I think, the same performers. This was recorded and released in 1988. So I think this was recorded during the same sessions as Viva Hate. I could be wrong, it wouldn't be the first time, but with Sandy Shaw on vocals instead of Morrissey. It is an amazing song, and you will be pleased to hear a Morrissey vocal that is absolutely immaculate exists on the 2010 expanded version of the Boner Drag compilation album. There's a number of other songs which came at the same time around about Viva Hate. Now, I've mentioned 3 of them already, which will get more detail in the Boner Drag period. There are also a number of songs that were released later. So we had, in 2010, to go alongside the Boner Drag reissue, we had a reissue of Every Day's Like a Sunday. No extra tracks on this. The B-side was a remix of November Spawned a Monster called November the 2nd. So not really part of this period. In 2011, I think, maybe 2012, inexplicably, Morrissey released a 20-year-old LP track, Glamorous Glue, as a single, which was backed with 2 songs from the Viva Hate sessions. On the picture disc 7-inch, we had Treat Me Like a Human Being, which takes its name from a song by New York Dolls. That song was also on the CD single of Glamorous Glue, which I still have sealed in the days when you could buy 3 singles for £5. On the second 7-inch, you had Safe, Warm Lancashire Home. Both of these are short, inessential songs. We also had, on the expanded edition of Boner Drag, some extra songs: Happy Lovers at Last United, Lifeguard on Duty, Please Help the Cause Against Loneliness, as B-sides, and unreleased songs from the Viva Hate era, which appeared for some reason on the Boner Drag release. There was one live show at the Wolverhampton Civic Hall. Morrissey contacted Johnny Marr to say, would you like to play one final farewell show? That never happened. And then there was a couple of extra things that happened on top of that. There's an unreleased song from the era called I Don't Want Us to Finish. Pretty sure we can guess who that's about. That was on Nothing and has not been released and not been heard. And in 1997, EMI, in their infinite wisdom, for their 100th birthday, released an expanded deluxe edition of Viva Hate with a different sleeve and different extra tracks. These extra tracks, none of them have anything to do with the Viva Hate period. They are Let the Right One Slip In and Passionate Love from 1992. At Amber, Girl Is Likely To, Michael's Bones and I've Changed My Plea to Guilty from 1990. I'd Love To from 1994, and a live version of Disappointed from 1991. I don't know why I bought this. It's a bloody rip-off. But I did, because I'm a record collector. That's what I do. There was also an aborted Peel session. So the Viva Hate lineup of the band went into Maida Vale to record a Peel session for John Peel. It didn't work. It didn't work at all. And so they gave up and they didn't do the Peel session, which was a great shame, actually, because effectively I think that killed Morrissey's stage career for a number of years. He was like, I'll try the Peel session. Hopefully I'll have the confidence to go on stage and sing songs in front of people. And it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. The Peel session's never been broadcast. I don't think it was finished. And so we never heard it. And that really brought the Viva Hate period to an end. So we have Suedehead, well, education in reverse, technically speaking, and Every Day is Like Sunday. This is an important period for me. I really, really love this era. I felt like I just discovered an artist after the end of the Smiths, and I was really, really pleased that it wasn't the end, but it felt like it was a new beginning. So that is Morrissey's Viva Hate. If you don't know this stuff, listen to it. You might find something that you love. If you do, listen to it again, because you've probably not listened to it for a while, and it's bloody marvellous. Apart from you, Grant and Jane, I know you love Morrissey and have seen him, I think, about 100 times, and I love that you do. It's absolutely wonderful. So have fun and take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. I'm going to wrap up now just after the 1 hour mark. My God, I didn't think I'd be able to talk about Morrissey for an hour, but here I am, and I've done it. And that is that. So, see you all soon. Good night and thank you.